Good morning, everybody. It's good to see you here. We've got a good turnout today as well. Turnout, what am I saying? A good number of people watching, so that's great. What we're going to do for the next 40 minutes or so is talk about social selling. If you've been watching the recent trends in digital marketing, you will have noticed that this is now one of the new big things. I think last year it was sort of big data and such like, social CRMs. Now we're talking about social selling. So what does that actually mean? Well, in essence, it's all about where social has sat for the last few years. Traditionally, in the marketing arena, I guess you could say, marketing have very much owned things like content creation, distribution, and so on and so forth. What's happened recently, though, is, of course, companies and brands, businesses, organizations have realized that salespeople, their sales teams also need to be equipped with social media skills. Why is that? That is because social media, if you typically read a lot of the case studies in social media, most of them or many of them are B2C. If you're selling t-shirts, jewelry, accessories, fashion, social media case studies typically revolve around those sorts of things. Yet social media has now become very important with regards to B2B, simply because when you are selling in a B2B arena, it's about relationship building. And of course, there's no better way, there is a better way, meeting actual people face to face, but there's very good ways of using social media to build relationships, build your network. And I guess some of you even listening to this, you've probably got fairly large networks on places like LinkedIn. So really, how do we build these networks? How do we work this? How can we, in essence, use social media to grow and build our networks and use it to sell? Firstly, I always like starting with slides like this one, because if you remember, not so long ago, I don't know how old you are, but not so long ago, I remember selling down in the West Country, and this was pre-mobile phones even. And to make a phone call, you literally had to find one of these things. I mean, we had cars, we were selling, we were on the road, and yet we had to find one of these things that worked, which was always very much a challenge. And I remember I used to have to phone my manager if I went on a daily basis, if I went off in the field, so to speak, and it was a nightmare. And then we got into these. This guy is great. I mean, look at that phone. It's just enormous. And that's where it started. In fact, I remember having a sales guy trying to pitch me a phone. This must have been the late 80s, and he wanted £1,800 for something that looked a little bit like that. So it then moved on. We then, obviously, voicemail kicked in, and I think one of the big problems that voicemail has caused for salespeople is it's now, let's be honest, so amazingly easy to avoid cold callers using voicemail, filtering out, and so on. So in 90 traffic jams as well, we've had to put up with those, and still do, of course. They're worse than ever. Which is surprising, really, because you can do a degree of sales activity without having to get into cars, even without having to make phone calls. Now, I am not for 1 second pretending that one can sell things without personal contact of some form or another, be it face-to-face or by the phone. What I am saying is that a lot of it could be, how shall I say, re-engineered to make life a little bit easier, so that one doesn't have to sit in these traffic jams, that one doesn't have to get through call filtering. And that can be done by social media, and of course the many apps around, like this one that we're actually using, GoToWebinar, GoToMeeting. You've also, if you want to go more of the budget route, you've got things like Skype. All right, okay, there is a better way, and that is social selling. Okay, what is the definition? I've picked out some key elements here. One is The social selling is the process of developing relationships. I think that picks up on the point I mentioned earlier, which is that that's the best thing about it, is that you can build those relationships often before you've had, in fact, usually before you've had any type of contact with the lead or the customer, sorry, not the customer, the lead whatsoever. And of course, a lot of this activity takes place on the big social networks like LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Pinterest. And of course, social selling, why not? It should also integrate with offline activities as well. So let's have a look at this and how it works in a little bit more detail. I've broken it up into 5 separate stages, which the first one I've called scope, the second plan, as you can see, the third curate and create. This obviously refers to content. Seed and share, monitor. But I'm actually going to look at each of those in a bit more detail because I know I just read out the actual what's in the squares. But let's just look at these in a little bit more detail so we can work out how they work. Now, the first thing is scoping. And when we scope in when we're doing social selling, the first thing we need to think about is, who do you want to reach? Now, the obvious answer is, well, we want to reach potential customers. But what do we actually mean by that? And is it only potential customers we want to reach? Do we want to reach maybe influencers as well? Should salespeople be involved in reaching influencers? Well, my answer to that is it really probably depends how large your business is. But in fact, I do train some very large companies in social selling. And it's also part of the salesperson's role to be an influencer. So it's not just about customers. It may be influencers. It may be influencers that can influence decision makers inside corporates. So we really need to define that, but we need to think about who we're trying to reach in more detail. And we'll look at that in a moment. One of the great things I find about social media is that you can use it to learn a huge amount about people. In fact, I think we've got a number of people on the webinar at the moment, some of which I know, and hello. But you can also, if you want to find out about people, really social media is a great way of doing it. Not only can you find out about individuals, particular individuals, you can also find out about what people are saying. You can monitor what they're saying. You can set up things like mention, who's talking, Google Alerts, to see the sort of things that your audience may be talking about. And of course, you need a network to start with, but it's really easy, and it's also quite easy to build your network if you know how. One of the functions that I've got here, screen up, is the advanced search. Now, this is part of the premium version of LinkedIn. You can do a degree of advanced search, but the best of it you get when you pay for a premium account, which is not expensive. And you can search under multiple criteria. Now, here you'll see, I don't know if you're familiar with this, and maybe some of you are, you'll see that on the left-hand side, you can search by keywords, company names, through first name, second name, etc. So you can do quite a lot of filtering there in terms of demographics. The other thing I use a lot is second connections. So if you are looking to talk to someone in a particular business, then you can do second connection searches. Second connections are the connections of your connections. Now, if you think about it, if you've got 500 connections and your connections typically have, say, a couple of hundred connections, which is about the average on LinkedIn, that means you are one person away from 100,000 people. In other words, 500 times 200. And that's a lot of people. And it's possible, probable even, that if you want to get to a particular person within a particular business, you can do that using the second connection functionality within the advanced people search. The other thing I find is if I'm going to meet somebody or if I'm going to make a phone call with somebody, I can also use, this is of course on LinkedIn, I can use LinkedIn to find a lot about that person. Also what I can do is I can, depending on the name, if it's a very common name, then it's more difficult. But I can also see what people are saying on social media. So it's just learning more about the people that you want to target. There's lots of ways of doing online research about your potential contacts and the businesses that you want to talk to. And this works in a number of ways. It can work for people who you've had what I guess you could call light contacts. So you may have met them at an event, or you may have been to a conference, or as happened to me quite recently, I was just literally, someone was in front of me in the queue. I've met people on aeroplanes. I met one of the VPs of Silicon Graphics on an aeroplane. But you're going to be meeting people all the time during your business life. And one of the things that you want to do, maybe, if you want to build a commercial relationship with that person, or even a relationship with that person in a business sense, is to know a little bit more about what they do and so on and so forth. And one of the obvious places to look is their company website. In fact, I can honestly say that before I meet anybody for the first time, I always have a look at their company website, and not just the home page. I'll go and look at what services they provide, the scale, where their offices are, what they do, that type of thing. And it's a good thing to do. Another thing is Wikipedia. Wikipedia, as we know, isn't always 100% reliable, but nonetheless, it's not bad. And if you want to get a sort of outline history, it's very good for business history. And I've found actually the larger the company, the more accurate that business history is, because often they'll be managing that profile. But Wikipedia is another place where you can find out about businesses, not so much people unless they're celebrities or extremely well known. Social accounts and profiles, an obvious one. In fact, I'd go so far as to say we don't just look at social accounts and profiles. We might look at their competitors as well. In my job, as it were. Looking at people's social profiles, you can see how frequently they post, where they post, what they post about, what issues they're facing, that sort of thing. So this is all the sort of first stage of learning more about the people you want to talk to. And this is an important thing to do, because you need to know whether that person might just become a contact or a friend, or whether that person might become a customer or a client. Industry, media, publications and news. The web, of course, is awash with information about all of this. And again, it's a really, really good place to it's good, obviously good to find out from the various media out there. Very easy to do, as I've already mentioned, a couple of resources that you can do that with. And so in terms of the research role, or scope role, as I call it, it's good, as I say, it's another thing. Another one is there's lots of applications. I mean, literally dozens of them. I've mentioned 3 there. 3 of my favorites, which is BuzzSumo, Reddit, or Reddit, as some people say, and Mention. There are loads of places. BuzzSumo I can highly recommend, and use that a lot. Financials, you'll find out the scale of the business. So in terms of qualification, obviously in some cases when the business you're talking to or want to talk to is very large, then it's not so important, but it might be worth knowing which companies they own, which brands they own. Sometimes if you're talking to a very large company, they own multiple other businesses. You might want to learn a little bit about the company structure. Sometimes they buy their competitors, things like that. So learning about the financials, even in smaller companies, will give you an idea of the sort of budgets they may have to spend, which is always very useful when you are thinking about selling to them. Press releases, an obvious one. I would recommend using something like Google Alerts to monitor that. Really good for monitoring press releases. You have to put in the name of the company. Sometimes it's worthwhile putting the name of the topic as well. Their own marketing collateral. Often when I meet companies, particularly professional services companies such as solicitors, accountants, things like that, they often have sort of information about what they do in their reception. It's always nice to pick some collateral out and see, because you get a real feeling for the culture of the company. Nowadays, people tend to put a lot of PDFs on their sites, and I've done 2 or 3 things here. You can both download people's their own marketing collateral, but I've also found it quite good for finding PDFs from their competitors and sharing that with them, because remember, it's all about building relationships throughout the sales activity. The obvious ones, I've sort of mentioned this before, but previously I mentioned it with regards to profiles. This is within context of the activity of these businesses. So we're talking about frequency, we're talking about trends, issues, things that they're posting about. YouTube is great if they have an active YouTube account, especially if you've got things like interviews, videos explaining what they do, that sort of stuff. Blogs, it's a good idea to read their blog. What are they blogging about? What's the quality of their blog? And so on. And of course, they're people, and that takes us back to LinkedIn as well. Now, when we've got this information, of course, one of the things we have to do is qualify. And in order to qualify, some of the things we do, and some of the things I think worth doing when you are using social media in a selling context, is we always think about the business sector. Is it a business sector we're familiar with, or is it a one we're unfamiliar with? Is it something we want to work with? Not that I've got anything against these types of businesses, but sometimes we get inquiries from people who are sort of organizing stag parties. Now, whether you want to work with someone like that or not work with someone like that is it's not an ethical decision. It's all about what sort of business you want. And therefore, business sector, I think, is really important. We find ourselves, particularly recently, we're working with a lot of pharmaceutical companies, a lot of tech companies, and a lot of health and fitness type companies. So those are the sectors we particularly look at, but we're not exclusive in that sense. Size, I think size is really important, because I think you need to identify where the sweet spot is, if you like, and if it may be working with very small companies, or it may be working with very large companies, or something in between. And again, I think size is a factor that one can find out quickly online. Location, we've worked with companies and do work with companies all over the world, but we do find generally that more of our customers obviously are generated nearer to home, because we're not a huge business. We have got a number of businesses in the US and Europe that we work for, but we'll particularly look out for someone more local. That doesn't necessarily mean in the Sussex area, but something like London or somewhere like that. Role. I'm always very conscious of what role people have. Status. By status, I mean where they are in with regards to what you want to talk to them about. So if they're extremely advanced, or they've already got it sort of under wraps, as it were, then maybe you qualify them out, or maybe not. And of course, budget. Now, of course, typically you obviously ideally want to find out a budget, but you can do all but. So you can look at the size, scale, spend. You can look at the marketing things that they're doing already, in our case, or the activities they're doing already. And obviously, whatever service it is you want to sell to them, you can make a value judgment on whether you want that sort of business as a client even. And that sometimes is a cultural decision as well. So obviously there's a great difference in culture between, say, a record company and, say, a firm of lawyers. Have you got the skill set to deliver whatever it is you're selling to both? So there's a lot of qualification. And I think the important thing about qualification in all types of selling is to be talking to the people who I think, I don't think one should only talk to the people that you qualify in, because it's nice to have a nice network of friends and contacts anyway. But in terms of commercial growth and sales and revenues, obviously it's probably advisable to focus on businesses that you really want to work with, and that's important. The other thing is, where do they live online? I'm always going on about this. I personally think that if you're in a business-to-business field, that there are certain social networks that are more important than others. The one I've always said I think that's the most important is LinkedIn. I think you've really got to have a good profile and a good understanding and a good presence. So you need a company page on LinkedIn. You need to be present in a number of groups. And you need to be personally active on LinkedIn if you are in the business of selling to other businesses. I think if you're in the business of selling to consumers, then obviously one's talking more about the sort of Facebook arena. But I put a caveat in here, and that is that if you're targeting people on Facebook, nowadays, quite seriously, and we've done a couple of webinars on this, quite seriously you need to be looking at promoted posts, simply because of the way that the Facebook algorithm has changed, whereby only something like under 2% of people will see your posts. LinkedIn haven't gone quite so draconian yet, but LinkedIn, what it has done, it's added all sorts of additional functionality, premium accounts particularly, and all things like Pulse and Connector. And LinkedIn knows what it is, very much so, and it's trying to provide us as much as it can in terms of assistance to businesses who want to use it as a network to grow their networks and grow their sales. And there's some pretty cool things they've done, I have to say. It's almost LinkedIn, you can almost use it as a fully fledged CRM if you wanted to. Other particular networks, obviously YouTube. I haven't got SlideShare here. I always think that SlideShare is worth having some presentations up on SlideShare. Seems to have lost its way a bit, SlideShare, now that I believe it's owned by LinkedIn. I think it used to have a lot more, I guess, weight than it did. I think the problem is that there's now so many presentations and slide decks being loaded all the time. It's sort of the quality has gone down quite considerably. That's just my personal view. YouTube, while there is of course a mountain of stuff there, I still think there's a lot of opportunities. And of course what we're seeing now is the growth of variants of Twitch. I don't know if you're familiar with Twitch. It's basically sort of real-time video, but while it's that, it gets to be archived. I think we're going to see that happening a lot in business in the future, Twitch-style social media channels being developed, which is still in the gaming arena, games arena, but I think that's going to extend, and I see that YouTube have recently launched their own functionality that will support that. What are people talking about? This is the thing, in order to sell something or in order to use social selling, the thing is about listening and finding out what people are talking about. Now, typically, most businesses, of course, are looking to either increase their revenues, increase their profits, and reduce their costs. And typically in the business context, what a lot of people are talking about is the things that they have to face with regards to those activities, if you like, those objectives. And of course, we need to understand when we're working in particular verticals, in particular sectors, we need to learn about how those sectors work. Again, I mentioned that I'm doing a lot of work with pharmacy companies at the moment, and of course they have their own unique challenges in many senses, in terms of what they can and can't do, in terms of how they can and can't market their own and sell their own products. And knowing about a business means that when you're talking to somebody who's in that business, a decision maker, if you like, or an influencer, you need to understand the things that I've identified here. There's trends, the changes, particularly the challenges, the fears, where the tomorrow, what's going to happen to those businesses tomorrow. And typically the other big challenge, which I could have added to this, is the whole nature of the rapid growth of technology and innovation that I think some people are finding, to be absolutely honest, a little bit overwhelming. And so there's all these changes going on, and you need to really be finding out about how these changes are affecting your target market, particularly in a business-to-business arena. In terms of, obviously social selling is more orientated towards B2B. B2C, if you're selling to consumers, obviously this slide isn't so relevant, but what I would say is that it's relevant if taken in a different context. So if you're targeting B2B, you would be looking for changes in cultural thinking, what people are doing now. And of course, we've had sessions on this before, but we've talked about the growth in use of technology, smartphones, iPads. There are some massive cultural changes going on right across the board, and we know all this because we've been seeing it happen for the last 10 years. But what does this mean for businesses in the future? Obviously in the UK, there's a lot of interesting trends happening in terms of the overall population getting older. I'm sure there are huge opportunities there due to the baby boom in the 60s. Okay, what value can we offer? This is all part of the social selling considerations, if you like. What can we create? And value in this context really means content. Yeah. What sort of content can we create to show that we know what we're talking about? Now, this is a bit of a self-promotion. Apologies for that. I shouldn't really apologize, but you know what I mean. This is a blog post that Gemma, a lady in our office, very talented writer, wrote called 4 Tools to Simplify Social Selling. I thought it was nice and relevant. So if you're into social selling, check out that blog post because it's pretty cool. And it's got some great tools there that will help you on your way if you're interested in social selling. And that's what I mean about you must be sincere about wishing to help people. Now, I don't know, I haven't looked at all the people listening to this webinar at the moment. I don't know whether you are, in inverted commas, leads or not. I don't mind. If you want to consume our content, then great, consume away. And I think that's the attitude one has to take. You've got to be generous online. You've got to be generous with your help, with your time, with your efforts. And someone along the line might say, yeah, I think these people know what they're doing. I like the sound of what they're doing. I could work with these guys. Who knows? And that's great. And that's what I mean about not just doing it for the return. You will find that you're doing a lot of activity in building networks and supplying content and creating content and curating content, of course, without necessarily getting anything back. It doesn't matter. That's not, if you always want something back, then you don't understand social media. It's not just about the return. It's not just about the pounds, shillings, and pence. So planning, what do we need to consider? Well, the first thing we need to do, we need to be really clear about what our objective is. If we're going to social sell, what is our objective? I can be completely honest with you about this. Our social objective right now is building pipeline. We want to talk to more people, and we're finding that using content and ebooks and webinars is achieving that objective. But of course, it has to be backed up with activity as well. And of course, as I mentioned, only maybe 10%, even less than that, 5% of the people who are consuming all this are going to ever likely to become customers. One mustn't mind. That's just the nature of social media. But nonetheless, we've got to be clear about what our objectives. It could be brand awareness. It could be moving into new markets. It could be closing more sales rather than building more pipeline. It could be shortening the lead cycle. It could be in support of the sales team. It could be that you literally want to onboard your sales team into social media, in which case they're going to need training, they're going to need encouragement, they're going to need management that knows that's effective. I always think, I think you definitely need a really robust CRM software now, whether that's Microsoft Dynamics or Salesforce or Infusionsoft or Highrise or whatever it is. And those are some of the best, if not the best. You've got to have a robust CRM. I don't think you can do proper social selling with just a spreadsheet or a list of contacts. I really think. And nowadays with CRMs, You know, Dynamics is only, I don't know what, £30, £40, something like that per seat. I don't think there's any excuse in terms of cost to not have a professional CRM. And I also think that you need to have a CRM which integrates with other stuff as well. And one of the things that we're finding particularly useful is lead forensics. So if you want to talk to us about lead forensics, you know where to find us. Now, what lead forensic does, it basically tracks who visits your web pages, which is pretty cool. Now, it can't track everybody because it works on a technology, if you may or may not understand, called IP addresses. And so it can do it pretty accurately. And you look down that list and you can see there's some quite interesting names there. One of which, if you're listening now, I haven't checked all the attendees, is Ski Solutions. I did a talk at a snow sport event 3 weeks ago, and I know Ski Solutions were there, and I know that on the 24th of November at 2:56 and 2:49, the person I met from Ski Solutions was looking at our website. That's pretty powerful stuff because I'll also know which pages they were looking at. And this is something else that you need, and this will integrate with our CRM package. So when somebody does this, makes this visit, it goes straight into our CRM package, and I will be able to therefore have the name of the person. And Jack, who's sitting with me here right now, has been doing a mountain of work. We had a little bit of feedback earlier, but I think that was more the technology problems we were having. But Jack here's done I'm sitting with now, does a sterling job on working with our CRM and working with our site traffic software. And you need these things in place. And if you're a large brand or a large business, obviously you have more budget. Now, I've just been actually training this morning at 2:30. I was training a very, very large technology company they're based all over the world. They've got offices all over the world with 400,000 employees. And I was talking to them about social selling. I was training them about social selling and for 5 hours. And they essentially do the same thing. They have a number of tools which they integrate together in order to build their pipeline and close their sales. They're using similar tools to little old us have and using the same processes as are other people who are now doing social selling. So you need some good software to support it all. Okay. Now I'm running out of time, so I'm going to speed up a little bit. You need to ensure your profiles are set up well, okay? So you need to do like a mini audit of your profiles. So go and check out your profiles. And by that, I don't necessarily only mean your corporate profiles. I also mean your personal profiles or the profiles of the people who are involved. So for example, if you've got a sales team, they need to make sure their LinkedIn profiles and ideally their Twitter profiles are set up properly and represent your business properly. If you are a small business doing this for yourself, then clearly you need to go and check that all your profiles are set up well. And as far as can be done, you are reasonably well connected. The tip on starting a new social network, I can tell you right now, if you want to quickly get a bunch of contacts, then the best way is to start with friends and family. So if you haven't got a profile on any of these networks, then the quickest way to build a network is to start with your current network, who probably have been thinking about getting onto the same network, or maybe you're already on it. So it's a quick way of getting the first, say, 100 or 150 connections, and then at least you're not Norman No Mates with only 2 connections and people thinking, hey, do I need to connect to this person? And it's always quite fun I love it when a new major, there hasn't been one for a while, I don't think, a new major social network comes out. And before you panic, we'll also talk about how to manage multiple networks in a little while. I always think, as I said, another thing to do, and this is a tip I always add, when you want to build your LinkedIn profile, just simply upload your entire address book from your chosen mail package into LinkedIn. And what LinkedIn does is it checks to see who's already on LinkedIn, send them a little connection request, and most people, if they know you, they'll reply back. It's a very good thing to do to start building your network. It's a good way of getting started. Get into some groups, relevant groups. Now, what I mean by this is not only join groups whereby they're related to your particular industry, but join groups that also where your target audience are joining. So if you want to sell into, let's say, professional services companies, even though you may not be a firm of accountants or lawyers, then how about going into a group there that are? And as I said, there are ways, I'll show you in a minute, of multiple posting. So join and engage with relevant groups. Now, I believe the limit of groups is 50, unless LinkedIn have changed it. Someone I'm sure can correct me there. So I'm very selective about my groups, which means I cycle them. If a group is dormant, I will leave it. If a group gets massively busy, it depends on the group. I will often leave it. If it's not really relevant to anything, then I will leave it. So don't just stick with the same groups. I personally find that mid-sized groups, ones that aren't too big or aren't too small, are the best ones in terms of engagement, because you can actually have conversations with people. Okay, plan your content. Now, this is one that we use. What we do is we, as a business, and I'm putting my white hat on now, is that we plan all our content in advance. We know what content we're going to be producing. We know what types of content, what formats. We've got some new plans. We're working on a new series of videos. Keep in touch, because I'd like to tell you about that. They're going to be really cool. Anyway, coming back to the point, we plan content, but I also, from a personal point of view, and remember, a lot of social selling is about personal branding. I always have it in my mind as to what the sort of things that I should be talking about. Let me give you a really good example. Now, if I was to post how to do SEO, let's be honest, I mean, most people nowadays have a decent understanding of how to do SEO. That's search engine optimization. What people really want to know would be the newest things to do in SEO, in search engine optimization, the latest trends, maybe the most recent Google algorithm changes. That makes it much more timely, and that makes it more interesting, probably, to your target market. So rather than just saying, we're going to talk about social media, or we're going to talk, and in your own industries, think about not just we're going to tell you something, tell people, I try and tell people something they don't know already that's important to them and valuable to them. And if you do repeat news, I often find when there's news within an industry, everybody says, oh, well, I'll repeat the news. Try and change it a bit. I don't mean change the news. I mean, have an opinion on it rather than just repeating it. And that makes it more interesting and more thoughtful. So here we've got ebooks, different types of content. So this is about repurposing. So let's say, for sake of discussion, what am I saying? Let's say for the sake of this workshop, you decide to create an ebook. What you do is, from that ebook, you can create a presentation. In fact, I can tell you right now, this particular workshop, this particular webinar actually derives from the blog post that Gemma wrote. We were thinking about what can we talk about. We were talking a lot about social selling, and there is actually, it was the other way around. We wrote the blog post first, and we thought, right, now we're going to do a webinar on social selling. But this is a typical cycle whereby you might create an ebook. From the ebook, you might create a SlideShare presentation. From the presentation, probably in parallel, you might do a webinar. And in fact, it usually works the other way around, but essentially you do the webinar, you obviously need a slide deck, so you put the slide deck in SlideShare. From that, you end up with a video, and the video of this is being recorded, so the video of this presentation or this webinar will go on to Vimeo, YouTube, and so on and so forth. From that, you can create blogs, and from that, you can create an infographic, and if you like, you can take tweets. Now, essentially, one could pick a topic, let's say social selling, which is fairly new, not new, but fairly new. One could literally run a theme all the way through all those different types of content. And of course, the great advantage of that is cost, efficiency, and continuity, if you like, because you can focus on particular things. So recently we were talking about competitive intelligence. That was what we did last month, and we were very into that. And then we've working with a lot of people looking at their competitors. Oh, by the way, of course, if you want us to look at your competitors, drop me a line. More than happy to do that, any of the people who are attending this webinar. But coming back to the point is that it's about repurposing. It's about focusing on things that you believe will be of interest. And what social sellers call this is they call this a play, a marketing play. This is something that you can create with marketing, and marketing and sales now being so close. In fact, so close that in essence they're all the same thing now. Okay, so you've probably, if you've been to any of my training sessions, you'll be familiar with this concept. We've used it a number of times. I didn't invent it. It's tofu, MoFoo, BoFoo, and it's just crazy, crazy words. What they mean is top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. Top of funnel, what does that mean? Top of funnel means when you first get in contact with someone. If you go in full-on sales, if you go in with a hardcore pitch, they will probably filter you out sometime. They will make their excuses. They will filter your emails into a junk folder. You will get nowhere. This is not the way anymore, okay? I dare say there are still people out there hard cold calling dozens of people, hundreds of people, and getting a tiny, tiny % success rate. I wish you luck if you're still doing that. Personally, I think that the world has moved on and is moving on to something much more meaningful, and that is really what we're talking about today. MoFoo, middle of funnel. Middle of funnel, it's about educating people. It's about providing them with content that help them make decisions, not necessarily making a decision to use you, although it would be nice. So you educate people. So it's how to choose, how to buy, how to support, how to do things, right? And MoFoo is differentiation. So that's the tough one. You have to differentiate yourselves from your competition. And you have to have some unique things to say to people if you want to differentiate. And whether you're a large business, you can talk about full service or full multiple products. When you're a smaller business, you can talk about greater focus, greater flexibility. So there is always going to be differentiators. The question is, what is your differentiator? If I said to you, what is your primary differentiator? Could you write it down in one sentence? Then I ask you the question, does that differentiator appear on your home page of your website? I'll leave that question to hang in the air, because I think that it's not just about the home page of the website. I think when you're selling, I think it's all about differentiators. And to a degree, thought leadership, being able to be trusted, I think that's another really, really important aspect of building relationships in the business to business. So create and curate. I've covered this before. We've got some examples here. This is one we created ourselves. You probably, if you've been an attendee of previous webinars, this is one of my favorites. It just works basically, and it's a great read. Extraordinarily successful content, how to plan and build an extraordinary content marketing campaign. If you want one, just pop us an email to that address with the heading. Just send me a direct message or whatever. That's what we call created. Can it be used for social selling? Heck yeah. I mean, if it goes out to 100 people and one of those people say, hey, I'm going to need to talk to these guys, that's perfect. This is a curated one, 5 easy tricks to help you write catchy headlines. I thought that's nice. And this one is, I guess, drier, but I was thinking of how to do one-to-one nurturing. This is what I was thinking of, taking people through the MoFoo and the BoFoo stage. Now, bearing in mind what we do as a business, we want people to take digital seriously. So this is an example of a piece of content that I might share with someone. And it's a Gartner survey which shows that digital business leaders are pulling ahead of the pack. So if you're selling digital services to people in any way, shape or form, or anything to do with digital, obviously this is going to be something worth sharing with people, if you want them to take digital seriously. So it's an example of you can see it's very recent. I say very recent, it's not that recent, but it's just 3 months old, so it's not bad. It comes from a very credible source, and it targeted at the right person. or shared, I should say, with the right person, because that's what we're really talking about. No, they're not necessarily going to pick the phone up and say, hey, we want to work with you, but it's just, again, sharing great content and building that relationship. Seeding, we need to think about where we seed. I was trying to think, okay, what are the different places where you seed content? Well, actually, lots of places. I mean, you've got news websites, media websites, you've got email, which is, I guess, more interruptive, not so much seeding, it's more push. Social networks, we are active in that way. We are active in helping our clients work in that way. And of course, video sites as well. So that's just a few examples of the ways in which you can very, very easily seed those products. Now, I mentioned earlier about how to seed into multiple places. Again, you need applications. This particular one is Hootsuite, which if you're not familiar by now, you should be. You've got places like TweetDeck, you've got Buffer, all sorts of apps, more expensive apps. They're all fairly low cost. Nowadays, you can even seed using certain CRMs or certain CRM extensions, and it works very simply, whereby you can choose the network. In this case, you can see I'm being set up for LinkedIn, Facebook and Twitter, and then of course you can identify groups as well within, say, LinkedIn. So you can post in multiple places from one single application, and that saves time, and that makes it efficient, and it means you don't have to be constantly going in and out. And of course, there are more feature-rich, more corporate-based applications that you can use to seed into multiple places as well. So you need to distribute your content into multiple places. And of course, you need to off-ramp. So you see there, I've got a bit.ly link. It's HTTP, the BIT. This is getting people to off-ramp to go and consume something. And again, we've touched on it before, but the concept is creation and curation. So you want people to consume either a piece of content that you've shared, and that's how social works. It may not be your content, and you also want people to obviously consume your own content. But be careful, because as we know, the web is awash with content. So ideally, you want to be very selective about the content that you share and the content you create. One thing obviously you want to use LinkedIn to keep your share and update. That's a good thing to do. And also, you can obviously submit to Pulse as well. So you can create, if you like, longer pieces of content to submit to Pulse on LinkedIn. All very good. Measure and monitor, this is the final section. I always think I can't obviously cover everything. I'd love to, but we're limited by time. Really important to monitor who is looking at your profile. Now, as you can see there, I've got a mixture of people looking at my profile. I took a screen grab yesterday of this, literally, because of this webinar, and I see there the head of Telegraph Money at Telegraph Media Group. Well, that's all right, isn't it? Hello, Jeremy. He's a second connection, but he was looking at my profile. So I think it's perfectly okay for me to contact Jeremy and say, hi, Jeremy, spotted you looking at my profile. Is there any way I can help? So I can be straight up about it and say, so, LinkedIn told me that, and you might be a guy, I might be able to help you in some way. Maybe what has he contacted for? Maybe he wants a comment about a particular part of the industry. And this is what I mean about influencers. I'm thinking that the head of Telegraph Money, and I promise you this literally was straight from my my profile yesterday. He is an influencer, and he's probably a very nice guy as well. So the point is that you keep an eye, and then I've got Vice President, International Partnerships, Digital President, Local Search, etc., etc. I would, again, a second level connection, and indeed Gemma, one of my colleagues as well. So this is the type of thing you get, and you can get a lot of analytics from that as well. So you can look at how many people have looked at your profile. You can break that down into types of profiles. I've got 263 people. Go through those. I got 4 viewers who work at DMI. I've got 31 viewers with the title Marketing Specialist. So there's all sorts of breakdowns, and you can also track. You see there, track how many people are looking at your profile on a weekly basis, which is all very useful indeed, and it all helps you be a better network, build networks, work with your networks, and so on and so forth. This is out of a CRM, and what this particular CRM does is it tracks activity. And you can see there, this is literally, this was taken, I think, about 3 hours ago. I took a screen grab of this, and you can see all this activity. Now, I always view opens with a degree of suspicion, because I think that when something's reported that an email has been opened, typically it means possibly that the person literally just was going down their list of emails, and obviously the email appeared in the panel on the right. Whether they actually opened it is another matter. However, you notice there that there is someone who clicked on something. There's Katie Harrod there who actually clicked on a link 42 minutes ago. So that's useful, isn't it? Because I can find out, I can do a little bit of research into what Katie looked at. This is not stalking, by the way, if you don't think that. This is just monitoring what's going on, using applications, using your CRM, using your tracking app for applications like Lead Forensics, using your CRM, using social media metrics to be monitoring or analyzing the activity. And I hope you found that useful. So just to sum up, we're now coming to the end of the hour. So I hope you're still with me. I'm just going to check to see if we've lost anybody. I really hope not. No, we're still looking good. We're still looking good. And of course, for those that didn't turn up, we will of course be contacting them. And if you want to watch this again, then by all means, we'll be posting it up as well. So just to take you through some summary points, be clear about your objectives. Are you intending to build brand awareness? Are you intending to build personal brand awareness? Are you in your personal brand? Are you intending, do you want to get more speaking events? Do you want to close more business? Do you want to reduce your costs? Do you want to build pipeline? Think about your objectives, and if so, who do you want within that pipeline? Use a robust CRM and integrate with other applications. I've mentioned a number of applications today. CRM, you have a wide choice of some excellent product out there, like, as I say, like Microsoft Dynamics, Salesforce, all the ones, Infusionsoft, Acton. I mean, there are about 15 to 20 major CRMs out there with some particular market leaders, such as Dynamics. You need apps to integrate with that. I would look at things like web forensic type apps, Lead Forensics, Trovis, and things like that. I would also be using apps to monitor things, so Mention, BuzzSumo, Google Alerts, using apps to aggregate the distribution of content, such as Hootsuite, TweetDeck, and so on and so forth. And then possibly some Buzzmetrics measurement like Brandwatch or Sprout Social on top of all that. So lots of apps to use. And of course, if you want to have an offline discussion with me, I'm more than happy to point in the right direction there. Listen to what? Listen to what your potential customers, potential leads are saying. What are their concerns? What are they facing? A lot of uncertainty about the economy. Are we going to get out of it? What's happening in China? All those sorts of things. How's that going to impact the businesses you're talking to? How's that going to work? Qualify in or out early. That's just, qualification is important because you don't want to be, by all means, it's fine to have lots of contacts. That's great. But obviously in commercial sense, if, there's no point trying to sell to people who have no interest or any budget to buy what it is you're selling. Put good content at the center of what you do. This is an obvious one, and really I've talked about this before, but content now is something that sales teams or salespeople should be using top of mind and sharing that content with their audiences. See into where your audience are, or audience is, I should say, sorry. So really go to the places where you believe your audience to be. Be quite careful about that. So don't just say, well, we like to use LinkedIn. Yes, look at LinkedIn groups, look at relevant groups that are important to you. And even if you're using Facebook, look at Facebook groups. Twitter, you can identify people to follow. You can identify people that you should be following. You can identify influencers and so on. Yeah. Repurpose saves money. This is repurposing your content. It enables you to, as I said, to have consistency through what you're talking about over a time period. So repurpose your content is great. Nurture. Don't give up. Keep doing it. It will work if done properly. And also, I have to. It's great fun. It really is good fun. I like sharing good stuff with people. Most people do like getting sent something valuable and interesting to them, and most people will respond at least with an email saying thanks. That's of great interest to me, and that's good. That's good on its own. If they become a customer, well, great. But if they don't, that's great too. You've shared some good content with them. Actively build your network. I think that this is a sort of potpourri of lots of things. When you meet people, encourage networking. Encourage. Sometimes people say to me, "Oh, I don't have a LinkedIn profile, or I have a LinkedIn profile, but I don't really use it." I mean, why? I don't get that. They might say, "Well, I have a private life." Yes, we all have a private life, and you can keep a private life. But also, it's most people. In the business sense, it's nice to have a network, and lots of people go off and meet and I do as well, meet at conferences and business events and things like that. And often in the surveys at the end of those business events, what was the most valuable thing? The networking, people say. And it's not just about finding business. It's a finding business in an enjoyable and pleasant way. And then finally, monitor and improve. So look at all the things you're doing and make them better. I'm just going to check to see if there's any questions from the audience. Often isn't, and then I get questions afterwards, which is absolutely fine. So if you have any questions about any of the slides, they will be posted and shared with you if you want. I hope I've given you a good interest into this. Maybe you're already doing it and just thinking of some ideas. Maybe you're thinking about doing it. I do train sales teams in social selling. Obviously, it would go into significantly more detail about how to use LinkedIn properly to lead hunt, how to use other social networks, Twitter, how to build networks, how to use social media and social networks to increase the effectiveness and efficiency of your sales. And of course, in line with that, also we can help and consult and advise if you're interested. It's not a big pitch. What's really important is that you get some value and had some value out of the last 45 minutes. Once again, now I have to go. I'm not sure if we're going to be doing a webinar this time next month because, good Lord, it's Christmas coming. So I've got Jack vigorously shaking his head at me. So I think we're going to miss December, but keep in touch. We will be doing one in January, definitely. And keep in touch. If you need to talk to me about anything digital marketing, you know what I'm like. I love it, and it'd be great just to catch up anyway. If you're at one of my webinars for the first time, I hope you found some value in it. You got my contact details there if you want to contact me, and be successful, and hope it work. Hope you have a good Christmas or a good holiday over the Christmas period, and see you in January, hopefully. And thanks very much for attending the webinar. Thank you.